Welcome to a true spiritual adventure story like the world has never known with your host, Dr. James Yogati Weldon.
Good day. This is Dr. Jim Weldon speaking to you from a heavenly mountain in Boone, North Carolina. Our community, which is dedicated to bridging the gap in our understanding between the different traditions of the world and helping us grow into the highest state of love and divinity possible. This is an ongoing series, quite surprising, entitled The Story Behind the Greatest Story Ever Told. A true spiritual adventure story, and it's actually now my fourth novel. I never expect it to go on like this, but it's something that must be done to share the true story of the adventure and the life spiritually of Jesus, the Christened One, who came into this world to be a servant to mankind, to take on the heavy burden that weighs upon us because of things we may have done unconsciously in the past. This is actually the second novel in the series. The first one is the story behind the story, really unknown to the world, of what happened to Jesus between the time of about 12 or 13 until he was seen again in what is now Israel in his early 30s. What happened in all of that time? Where did he go? What did he do? Of course, we know there was no Christianity in the world at that time. And you may suspect that the work that he did was not to create a church, a religion. All of that happened much later, hundreds of years later. So in this series, he has completed his journey to India. He's traveled back to his homeland. He's now in the middle of his first year of ministry, really connecting to many of the individuals which he has known in the past. You know, there would be no justice in life if what we see in this little span of time was all there was. Even this world, which seems so immense behind us, is honestly just a speck of dust comparatively in the universe beyond us. And we are growing, we are maturing, we have learned so much in the last several thousand years. But in some way, our spiritual understanding has not kept up with the pace of the development of the technology in this world. This work of mine began a number of years ago. I, without really any intent at all, begin to see in a very high state of consciousness, known as Turiya in the East, not in a conscious state, not in a sleeping state, obviously not in a dream state, in a state which I had no control whatsoever, and honestly no intent whatsoever to see anything like this. Scenes and events of the life of Jesus, and even some of the past of his life. How is such a thing possible? Well, there are a lot of things which would be considered impossible that are very possible now in this world. The fact that through this communication medium, the internet and the World Wide Web, I could talk to billions of people. Literally, my eyes could see anywhere on this planet. I could access almost any book on this planet. I could speak with individuals who I'd never known and met, groups of them, millions. Such a thing would be considered absolutely impossible. In order to understand how such a thing is possible, just think of what this medium has created for us. There's an old saying, nothing new under the sun. Well, there's been a lot of things new, but the potentiality has been there all along. My life has been a journey to understand and document the development of spirituality, of divinity, of a unified state of consciousness. And we're seeing aspects of that all around us. I mean, this little body of mine has trillions of cells. Each one of their cells is going about its business. It has a job, it eats, it drinks, it multiplies, it dies, it's reanimated. New cells come up, and that will continue in terms of, the years of my life, and it'll be gone. But in the scheme of things, of this universe, it's just a flicker in time. So I do believe we're here to bring something new into this world. So this is my individual attempt to do that, because quite frankly, I was very deeply involved with Christianity when I was a young child. In my early teens, I actually had a small church. But the religions of this world try to make sense of the spiritual beings that come into this world, but often these things happen long after they are gone. And our record in the Bible was composed, written, translated into many different languages by individuals that had a specific interest in how that was presented. Battles were fought, wars were fought over that. And so, without trying to correct all of that, and I'm not in any way, I am sharing literally what happened to me, the experiences that came with no control whatsoever. And that development and possibility has not been without many years of training. This year marks, I'm coming up to my 50 years that I've been practicing these methodologies and techniques which are designed to expand awareness. Evaluate the truth of that. Go back and listen to my earlier novels, which are online and available through Great World Wisdom, and now on apps and podcasts all over the globe. And that certainly would give reason to suspect that maybe some of this stuff is quite true. So in this part of the story of his life, he has returned to his homeland. John the Baptist, who foresaw that a great being was going to come into that part of the world, met him. He was baptized, and at that time he was christened. Now, what that means is not something that is easy also to understand. The divine consciousness, if you will, the Holy Spirit, male and female, entered into him and raised him up so that he could complete a short task, actually. There was only 2.5 years of that time that is being recorded here, but later it developed into a religion and went through many trials and tribulations there as well. So at this time, he's back and he's completed his first sermon at the church that he studied as a young child before he left the country. And he was rejected, but he didn't come in to be accepted, really, to bring peace to the world. He came in to stir things up a little bit and also to do something that's much more important, to help relieve the suffering in the world. He did a lot of work in India earlier, serving individuals, feeding the poor, and then also traveling around. Of course, there was no Christianity at all. He never heard that name, ever. And even his name was distorted in time. In this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about one of his highest and most spiritually developed devotees, and that was Mary Magdalene. She stood by him through the crucifixion, went up to the place where he was going through the transformation before he came out and met his disciples. And you could say he ascended, part of him did, but another part went back to India. That's part of the story. And she also had a past relationship, a karma, if you will, with him. See, there was really Jesus the man and the christened one, where this energy came in, and he had the capability to look into the lives, if you will, of those individuals that were with him. And he had the ability to know those that he'd been close to in the past. And Mary Magdalene was definitely one of those. Her name comes from where she lived or grew up. And you need to understand that there were many Marys that are talked about in the biblical records. They first met. I can tell you that Mary's heart just leaped, in just the sight of him. Tears started streaming down her face. You know, the spirit within us, it does know the bigger picture, the cosmic part of us, if you will, the eternal part of us, if you will. And it recognizes that relationship. I know what those feelings are like because that happened to me when I met my teacher the first time. And so she had a relationship with the cosmic aspect that had entered into Jesus, that had christened him, and she knew Jesus the man. And as many people might suspect, there was a relationship in the past between them. And there certainly was a relationship here. To try to explain how he was dealing with all of this, the man Jesus, will take a bit of explaining. But, you know, after, you could say the Holy Spirit, you could say the Divine Mother, the Holy Ghost, those words are fine. You can say any word that you want. But what you're pointing at is a cosmic awareness, a universal awareness, which literally is below us, above us. This is one of the first things he said in his first talk in the temple, where he was rejected after that. That Father is above us, below us, to the left, of the right. It is within us. It is our very being. It is our life. And we're going through this as part of the great, grand adventure of existence. We are all on a spiritual journey, whether we know it or not, to that unity. And of course, it doesn't make sense at all if you just consider the very few years that we're here as some speck on this other small planet in this universe, unless we have a long history behind us. And we are, whether we know it or not, whatever happens, going to have a long history in the future. And so she fell in love immediately. Totally. She was already in love, both with the man, Jesus, and the christened Jesus, christened one as well. It isn't like she thought this or she analyzed this. This was not a choice in any sense whatsoever. And so she was in the back part of the room, and they'd come to have dinner together with a few of the devotees. Now he was getting support, obviously, in the community. His family supported him, of course. But as he traveled about, he was not a wealthy man. There were no giant hostels everywhere, nothing like that. You would go into a community, you'd be invited in, a few friends would come over, and you'd have a talk. And I did that for a year. Personally, when I went to the terrorist regions in the northeastern part of India and I was in a totally Christian community. And I traveled all around from place to place and really made a difference. You see, the presence of that consciousness was the purpose that he was there. Just by that immense, unbelievable awareness was passing through this little square of his body. was a blessing to the entire region, blessing to the entire race. See, we are part of one life. We are also part of one genetic structure. And you could say all the genes got enlivened. They were raised, their vibrational level increased, more light. After he gave his first talk, he went out in front of the church, and literally everything was brighter. Everything was lighter. Even the birds chirped happier. Even the worms in the ground moved with new acceleration. So that blessing is an automatic result of the divine consciousness and an indication of our potentiality, an indication of what we are capable of living. And he said, the miracles that I have performed, really, we all have the ability to do that, but it does require that elevated consciousness. It does require bringing together and really breaking the separation between us and the universe as a whole. And she looked around the corner into the room and saw him and was like a shock, and looked again. The tears began to flow, and they will continue and do continue even to this day. See, we're here doing a big work now in the world. And so whatever events, what do they matter? It is the divine love that continues. None of that is ever lost. None of that is ever diminished. Whatever we may go through, obviously it appeared and appears to many that things are very, very difficult. But you know, what makes a good book? What makes a good novel? It's the ups and downs. It's the trials and tribulations. It's the seeking of usefulness, a purpose, ultimately seeking of living in that space in the heart of all hearts that makes it all so worthwhile. Without difficult times, how would we know good times? See, these are what's called opposite values, and they're absolutely complementary. You don't have one without the other. If it was the same temperature in your house, you wouldn't even know hot or cold. So that meeting was stupendous. I mean, if we were able to give expression to that in form, it would be like fireworks had gone off. Because that love is old, that ancient love is old in us, and it is seeking its very essence, seeking itself. This is how the divine dance of life is also a comedy. So we search and search and search to find. We look everywhere, up and down, back and forth, and we find and discover, not through intellectual understanding, but through the direct experience, what we are seeking is what we are, and that can never be diminished. So there were several things that were going on. First of all, just to have a christened being, an enlightened consciousness like that is a blessing in the world. My teacher always told me that job is always open, but it requires proper education to attain that. Jesus went through his training. He went through multiple lives of training. But we meet together again and again. And so Jesus, when he saw her, he was speechless. So the man Jesus began to see the scenes of the time, some of them, that they were together, how they played together as children, how they grew up together at one time, were separated with great heartbreak and came back together. In another time, as husband and wife. In a real sense, we are children of the divine being and existence. And of course, this isn't some guy or woman or anyone kind of sitting up on a cloud, looking down there, taking notes, judging us, because everything that we have that's good comes from that. Our mind, our intellect, our body, our capabilities. But aside from all of that, there is a principle of grace in the universe, which stands above all of the actions and behaviors and comes in a full form from time to time to take on the weight, take on the heavy burden. There's absolutely a principle of karma at work in this world. As you sow, so shall you reap. In physics, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And the past in the world, the past in the countries, the past in the people, and the past in our life is a lesser developed state. So when we're more in darkness, we make more mistakes. In my last episode, I talked about the healing of a young boy who was bludgeoned by a Roman soldier and could no longer hear. He could still hear within, and he was even afraid to open his eyes because there was damage to his cranium from that blow. Jesus came by in a couple of minutes. The energy, because of the love between those two children and the simplicity, they were healed. He was healed physically. They both were healed spiritually, which means that much of the weight, not all of it, of what they were carrying from the past was lifted and taken. So there's a principle in nature which Jesus was embodying here now. The christened one, at this special time, this meeting, he knew, he remembered, and he felt exceedingly glad and happy in all the things that had happened to him. And he went through some major trials and tribulations, and the things which he is yet to go through, which the world talked about, which he finished with just in a couple of years and moved on. We'll talk about what happened when he moved on. He didn't just disappear. There was an ascension, but something else happened also. So Mary Magdalene, an unbelievably great lover of the divine and of God, had fallen in love again, was in love already. She was talking already about the spirit of the divine and speaking from time to time to groups of people already. The church there of this Jewish community was restrictive. And there were a lot of controls on the female role in business and livelihood and travel, unfortunately. But she was living a good, devout life. All the rumors, which may have come up later, there's no evidence of any of that whatsoever. There are control issues later, after Jesus moved on, if you will. But the work was done. So she moved on as well. So all honor and gratefulness to Mary of Magdalene. Her search for truth and love, and her finding it and amplifying it and giving everything. When all the other devotees left and fled, she did not. So we'll talk more about that later in the next installment in the story behind the greatest story ever told. It is time to share that story. And whether people accept it or not, it doesn't matter, because truth is truth. And I'm not suggesting that everything that I say is perfect in every way. Words can be interpreted in many different ways. You say good, and some people take that same word to mean bad. So join us again in the next installment. And the whole purpose of this is to provide a bridge. We are in a time of awakening, although it doesn't always appear so on the surface. And sometimes it's the trials and tribulations of life that push us forward the fastest. So we'll talk again from Heavenly Mountain. Thank you for coming. Join me again. Come back. Share with your friends. And of course, there's an app now for your phone. There's podcasts out. There's videos out. greatworldwisdom.com, our Great World Wisdom on the app stores. Thank you. Bye-bye.